Today on Teach Me How to Vegan.
So I hate the saying, like, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Or if you can do it, anyone can do it.
Yeah, I don't like those either because I'm like, you don't know me. I'm stubborn. You don't know. Who do you think you are knowing what I can and can't do? Like, I go there. Do you know what I mean?
If they can do it,
like,
you can do it. You must not know about me.
Yes.
That my brain says instantly.
Yeah, it's bad. So we don't like those statements. However,
we don't know what you're going through, what your situation is.
Right.
All the things.
However, we will say if you have been struggling with cheese, we did as well. That was my last frontier, essentially, in the going vegan realm.
So I want to share real quick Dr. Barnard's recommendations,
okay.
And then I want you to share your recommendations.
Okay.
Welcome to Teach Me How to Vegan,
a podcast where we explore how to switch to a vegan diet.
I'm Tony, a health educator, fitness instructor, and plant-based eating program manager for Animal Protection of New Mexico.
I'm Mickey, a stay-at-home homeschooling mom and vegan cook who likes to play in the kitchen.
Our family stopped eating meat in 2007.
And we went vegan in 2016. Now we like to share with others what we've learned.
Thanks for joining us.
Let's get started.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Today's gooey conversation is going to be all about cheese. Specifically, why is it so hard to quit?
Yeah.
What makes it so difficult? And hopefully in understanding more in depth why it's so difficult to quit can help you, the listener, to better equip yourself to actually quit and stay quit off of cheese.
Yeah, because I used to say that I could never be vegan because of cheese and eggs. Mm-hmm. But it's primarily cheese, let's be real.
Yep. And if I had $1 for every person that said, I can be vegan except cheese. For every person that was just like you.
Yeah.
Or many people who are, they're like, pretty much I am vegan, it's just cheese.
Right.
And when in previous episodes we've talked about lapse and relapse, cheese is one of the number one things that I hear people have lapsed.
The main culprit.
That's the main, it's always that cheese.
Yeah.
And I've shared that, I don't like to get cravings or anything for meat or anything like that. But there's one single solitary food that once in a while I'm like, oh man.
That one's hitting me hard.
And it's a cheese pizza from Costco. Of all the places.
Very specific.
There's something about that Costco pizza that hits my brain and makes it want to light up.
Yeah.
What is it about the cheese that takes it there to that level?
Yeah.
So
I was just going to say, I think knowing sort of more in depth why, with the body and stuff and what's in the cheese and how we react and all of that stuff, that was helpful to me. That was really helpful for me to understand. And I didn't even go very in depth at that time. So I'm excited because you read The Cheese Trap in order to prepare for this episode. So I'm excited to see what new information you found or is in that book. But it was very helpful for me. So hopefully if cheese is sort of that last hurdle, or the cheese is the main thing that you're relapsing on and you don't want to have that in your life anymore, then hopefully this will be helpful.
Precisely. Like you mentioned, I read The Cheese Trap, which is a book written by Dr. Neal Barnard. So that's going to be sort of our manual for this episode. There's tons of information out there. Like you said, we learned a lot of it from just watching lectures on YouTube and stuff like that. This book didn't have a whole lot of new information, but it was more in depth, which was great. Yeah.
And that might be helpful.
Exactly. No, it is. And I think, I just want to mention we're using that as kind of our roadmap to delve into these topics so people know where the source of information is from. And, no endorsements, no anything like that, but it's just really, the most comprehensive resource that I could find on this topic.
Yeah, I agree. Because like you said, I feel like our knowledge about cheese and its effect on the body is really sort of pieced together from a variety of sources. And so it's nice to be able to direct people to just sort of one book that has, or one resource that has a lot of in-depth information.
Right.
But this is not the only place to find it. So,
Yeah.
it's not like one of those like, well, it's only one book. No, this information's sort of spread out all over the place.
Right.
And it's consolidated by Dr. Neil Barnard into a book.
Very good. Good way of putting it. So we're going to cover first why dairy cheese is so difficult to quit. Then we're going to talk about just a couple highlights from the book about why it's important to consider quitting dairy cheese.
Mm-hmm.
And the book takes a health and wellness centered approach. So just hit a couple highlights about that. And then a little bit about our personal stories and recommendations about quitting cheese, which we've discussed a little bit and alluded to in other episodes, but we'll talk more in depth today. And also, a little bit about some of our favorite cheese recipes and products.
Yeah.
So let's get into it. What in the world makes cheese so different? So this is where I really got a deeper understanding of what it is about cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Because cheese is dairy cheese specifically, non-vegan cheese, it's such a unique food product.
Okay.
That is unlike any other in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because of the way it's made. The first chapter gets into detail about how cheese is produced. And I never thought about how processed it is. People talk about like Velveeta cheese or
It's so processed.
Right. Or they demonize other products like
the giant 64 ounce, like the huge cans of nacho cheese sauce, and they're like, that's just chemicals.
It's so processed.
Yeah.
But even other foods too, like Go-Gurts or, and then even non-dairy or, vegan foods, people demonize those or even accidentally vegan foods like Ritz crackers or Wheat Thins. Like they're so processed. I avoid processed foods. But then they go eat cheese as if it's a natural product. Like it's just a dairy product, so it's natural, right? And I hear this a lot. People demonize the processed foods, but cheese is a regular part of their diet, and cheese is included in a quote-unquote whole foods diet or quote-unquote real foods diet.
Okay.
But then you get into the details of how it's made, and you're like, dairy cheese, just like the cheddar block of cheese, is one of the most processed foods in the world.
Interesting.
We talked about this a little bit in the milk episode. First, the milk has to be standardized. It's not like they just take it from the cow because it all has to have the same protein, calcium, fat content.
Okay.
So they add
or take away
non-fat powder milk.
Yeah.
They fortify it with different vitamins and minerals so that it's first standardized just off the bat. Then coloring is added. All the cheese doesn't magically have the exact same colors.
Cheddar isn't magically orange right out of the cow.
Right. So they use annatto for yellow, titanium dioxide or peroxides for white. Like mozzarella cheese isn't magically beautifully white.
Wow.
They'll use sometimes those ingredients. Then, it undergoes fermentation, which some people say that's good because it can add the probiotics and it's, good for your gut health. With cheese, it's interesting the types of bacteria that are used for the fermentation process, such as Staphylococcus epidermidis, which is one of the bacteria responsible for body odor.
Oh, wow.
Is used to make cheese.
You know how some cheese stinks?
Uh-huh.
It's that then, right?
Uh-huh. And that's exactly what the book talks about. Like
stinky cheese.
Stinky
because
cheese.
Of that bacteria.
There's a reason it's stinky.
Oh, wow.
Another one of the bacteria used is the bacteria that's responsible for stinky feet.
Oh, my gosh.
So without getting too gross or in the weeds, people are like, okay, that's enough. That's all we'll say on that. But it's just if you want to go deeper, fascinating the types of bacteria that are used.
Yeah.
And then they need to add rennet, which is either from cow stomachs or it's genetically engineered. So if a product has rennet in it, you want to see, is that from an animal or not?
Well, that's interesting because some people are so against genetically engineered foods. And yet one of the most popular products in the country possibly has some genetic engineering in it.
And
interesting.
Yep. According to the book, I think it sounds like a lot of it nowadays is genetically engineered versus how it used to come from the cow stomach. Personally, I would just want to avoid it either way. It just doesn't sound like a good idea. And it's easier to just avoid it than to try to figure out where it came from and how it was made. But yeah, and that helps break up the proteins and fats. And then the whey protein is drained off, taken out, because that is not part of the cheese. And side note, that's why the whey protein powders are such a highly marketed product.
Because it's a byproduct of the cheese processing.
Yep.
And so they have this whole massive amount of a product that let's market it this way.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yep. Like, what are we going to do with all this whey protein that we're just going to throw away?
Did the book,
I know. Let's sell it to
Yeah.
people trying to get fit and build muscle.
Did the book talk about why they take out the whey protein?
That's a good segue because, I'll just finish a little bit. After the rennet, the whey is drained off. Then a lot of salt is added, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just
There's just way more steps to the process than it's not like you take the cow milk and you add a bacteria and let it ferment and then you mold it and it's ready.
Right.
There's way more involved to mass producing the level of cheese in America that there is than like it was in, say, the 1700s.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very different. I don't even know how it was in 1700s. I'm assuming there's more steps to it even then than we thought about because that's probably when they were using the cow stomach lining, But it's just way more processed.
Right.
Than you would anticipate thinking,
Yeah. And so back to your question about the whey, the reason it's removed is because in order for cheese to have the melty, gooey, what makes it cheese, it needs a concentration of specific types of proteins.
Okay.
Whey is not one of those. And that type of protein is casein.
Okay.
And that's what makes cheese so unique is its concentration of casein.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it also ends up with a concentration of fats, primarily saturated fats, and hormones.
Yeah.
Whatever hormones are added or make their way into the milk that are given to the cow, and even in hormone, quote unquote, hormone-free dairies, the cow itself has hormones because it is a female mammal.
Yeah.
Right? So I wanted to share a little bit about the process, the creation of cheese to understand, because that helped me understand why dairy cheese is so unique. Because as we talked about, dairy by nature is not ideal for human consumption because of its concentration of hormones, its concentration of casein.
Yeah. Well, I mean, dairy milk comes from cows, and the whole purpose of that milk is to take a baby calf and make it gain 200 pounds in like a year or so. So, yeah, I'm tilting my head. You can't see it, but I'm tilting my head. Like,
right.
Come on now.
And
Let's think about that.
Exactly. And then in cheese, we take all of those things and concentrate them.
Yeah.
So it's a concentration.
And because they're not removing the hormones. There's not a way to do that.
Right.
So the hormones stay in the dairy cheese.
Right. So you end up with essentially concentrate of casein, fat, and hormones. Now, the thing about the casein is, well, why is that such a big deal? It's just a protein, right? This is where we understand why cheese is so difficult to quit, because cow milk is higher in casein than human milk. Now, casein has sort of addictive properties. The reason is, you might be like, well, why is that? Well, it's an evolutionary purpose, because we need babies to nurse. That's how they survive. So by giving them a shot of casein with their nursing, it lights up the pleasure centers in their brain.
So
they feel good. It releases dopamine.
Yeah. So you're saying there's casein in human milk as well.
There is, yeah.
Yeah. So the casein in human milk basically gets the baby coming back for more.
Yes. Yeah.
Essentially.
And think about the look on a baby's face right after they're done nursing.
It's bliss, pure bliss.
Bliss. And there's a reason.
Full tummy, endorphins running through the brain, warm, cozy mama. Blah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all, their brain's got all that dopamine going on. They're feeling good. But the human milk has so much less casein than cow milk.
Okay.
Camel milk has so much more.
Yeah.
Then we take that and concentrate it into cheese, and now it's just like
It's a hit.
it's a dopamine fest
Yeah.
in your brain when you eat cheese.
Yeah. When I learned about why cheese is so hard, I remember learning about casein morphine. Casomorphine, thank you. And that is something that's in casein, right? It breaks down into casomorphine. And yes, morphine, you heard that correctly. The casomorphine hits the same pleasure centers in the brain that like regular morphine would hit and attach to. And it does release endorphins and pleasure and enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know people can get addicted to morphine.
Yep, that's exactly
You're
it.
hitting the same pleasure centers.
See, I knew you were super educated in this.
You're gonna have a result there.
Right. Like I said, I knew you were super educated in this. You already knew about this.
Yeah.
You said it exactly how it's basically how it's said in the book, you know.
Yeah.
When casein breaks down into amino acids, it releases longer amino acid chains called casomorphines.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes it unique. Mm-hmm. And those, like you say, attach to the same brain receptors that heroin and other narcotics attach to.
Yeah. And so you get, I mean, of course, it's not the same. It's not the same.
Right.
You know,
we're not saying it's the same thing as morphine, but it attaches to the
same place. So if you feel like I cannot quit cheese, well, you're not wrong. There is a physiological reaction happening in your brain that makes it a little more challenging. Mm-hmm. And it did for me. I know it did for me.
Yeah, and going back a little bit, you know, well, I kind of think like, well, how bad could casein be if it's in human milk?
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, you have to look at the concentration,
right?
The amount,
right?
And then we're weaned.
Yeah,
like it serves its evolutionary purpose when we're babies.
Yeah,
for survival, and along with it, we're getting the liquid gold that is mama milk,
mm-hmm.
and then we wean and we're done, and that's it.
Right.
We're not necessarily meant to have it later in our lives, certainly not through the entirety of our lives.
Right.
And then again, the concentration. So I find it interesting fact, human milk cannot make good cheese because it's too low in casein.
Oh, wow.
So you can't make cheese out of...
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It has, yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I found that. I was like, oh, okay.
I feel like that says a lot in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. That's why I wanted to tease that out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in Dr. Barnard's words, he says, in other words, dairy protein has opiate molecules built right into it,
mm-hmm.
which makes dairy cheese the most concentrated form of casein in any food.
Why it's so unique.
Exactly.
Again, speaking to why it's so unique in our food system.
Mm-hmm. And it's also interesting. It makes me wonder, is cheese actually that delicious?
Oh, or is it just our evolutionary reaction, biological reaction to the cheese?
Exactly.
The hit.
Because you could make the comparison, and he does in the book, about things like alcohol and cigarettes.
Mm.
And you know, so he says, like, you know, the first time you ever drink a beer, it doesn't taste good.
Mm-mm.
I don't know anyone in the world that, like, their very first drink of beer, they're like, wow, that was delicious.
Right.
You know, they're like, people are like, it's an acquired taste. While it also releases dopamine
mm-hmm.
because of the alcohol content, and I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but I know that it releases dopamine, it makes you feel good, and so then your brain associates that good feeling with that taste,
mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden
it's not gross.
Vibing, all of a sudden it's not gross, and you like crave it whenever you're like trying to vibe and have a good time. You know?
That's an interesting thing to think about. The idea that, does any of that actually taste good if you get a dopamine hit from it? Just anything in general.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting thought experiment, something to mull over.
Yeah. It really just got me thinking a lot
mm-hmm.
about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also in the comparison to cigarettes, I used to smoke once upon a time, and I don't anymore. And now the smell of them grosses me out. It's gross. It's I think it's gross. And yet, once in a while, I'll catch a whiff that makes me think, And then I like snap out of it. But it's my brain wanting to go back to that. There's something like going on in my brain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I'm back to like, no, you don't like that smell. Why are you
having this reaction?
Sometimes think you like it. And I've just been wondering about that, about everything. I'm questioning my whole life now.
Does it actually taste good, or is it a dopamine hit?
Or is it good, but not like cheese?
Yeah.
It is good. Like other foods are good, but it's not that good that we have to like obsess over it as much as we do. Because we do obsess over it.
Yes.
I mean, the proof is in the pudding, but the proof is in the facts too. Another interesting fact from the book is that average cheese consumption in 1909 was 3.8 pounds per person per year. So in 1909, the average person ate 3.8 pounds of cheese per year.
That's like nothing.
In 2013, the average person ate 33.4 pounds of cheese.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah. In roughly 100 years, we added 30 pounds of cheese.
Per year per person.
Per year per person.
Holy moly. Oh my God, that's like an unfathomable amount of cheese. Is that in the U.S.?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's in the U.S.
That's so much cheese.
Because like I say, we obsess over cheese.
Yeah, we put it on like everything.
Everything. And we put it in everything in like ungodly amounts.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is about the Costco cheese pizza. Have you ever seen pizza with so much cheese on it?
Yeah.
It's an ungodly amount of cheese.
And it must have a lot of casein because it is melty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, that's 33 pounds of cheese per person per year. And that includes vegans. Do you know what I mean? Like when you think about like the vegan population,
it's an average number.
It's an average number, so that like
even with the amount of vegans increasing slowly but steadily.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't eat any cheese, and still.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the thing about averages.
They're contributing 33 pounds of cheese to you and I.
Yeah. So some people are eating 40 or 50 or maybe even more pounds of cheese per year.
What is that? Our family alone. Oh my gosh, that's wild. It's like 130 something pounds of cheese a year for our family that we're actually not eating. So somebody else is eating even more than the 33 pounds. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right, we can move on. I'll mull that over and go over that.
I know.
That's a lot.
Okay. But it's also interesting to know in studies, again, the proof is in the data. Studies show that cheese is the number one food reported to, quote unquote, make you lose control over how much you eat.
Wow.
You know how like some people like with potato chips, they just don't know how to act?
Yeah.
Or me with
eat the whole
popcorn,
bag.
I'll put myself on blast. Me with popcorn, I don't know. I can't.
Yeah.
Popcorn makes me lose control over how much I eat.
There you go.
I like own that. Cheese is the number one food that makes people do that.
Wow. And it's wild because in replacement, like the dietary food guidelines, they want to replace the meat with cheese.
Mm-hmm.
When Teen was in preschool, we were vegetarian before we went vegan. They couldn't use tofu as a replacement for the meat. It had to be cheese because of like the funding they got from the FDA, right?
I think it was the USDA.
The USDA.
For whatever reason, tofu was not an acceptable replacement. But
right.
Cheese was.
But cheese was. And then it was wild because he got to the point where he wouldn't even eat dairy cheese. He'd get a grilled cheese sandwich for lunch instead of whatever the meat option was, and he would eat the crust around it and leave the cheese. Or a quesadilla and eat around it and leave the majority of the sandwich. And his teachers were like, what is happening? And then we figured out that he just doesn't like cow cheese. He doesn't like dairy cheese. And so with the teachers in the school, we worked out that they still have to serve him that, and he can eat whatever he wants. They have to serve him, but on the days that he gets like a grilled cheese sandwich, we would take in tofu for him. And they were like, well, we don't know. I was like, no, you just give it to him. He eats it plain out of the package. We'll just bring you some and cut it up. And we just ask you to give it to him. And they had it in the classroom, and they did that. And so that's how we got around it, so that our kid could get fed at school, but it's wild that something so addictive is the primary replacement in the USDA food guides. Like they wouldn't even give us an option for tofu. I mean, maybe if there was like a documented medical allergy and something from the doctor, we would have had that option. But just as a choice in our family and a food preference choice that our 3-year-old, 4-year-old was exhibiting, we still had limited options. Thankfully, the school worked with us.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like he was just being picky.
Right.
And like, I don't like it. The teacher felt so bad.
Yeah.
Because she said he would literally just look at her and like he was going to cry. And then he would try to eat it and like gag.
Yeah.
And have these like physical reactions. And that's why she's like, let's break the rules. If we like, let's figure out a way.
Yeah.
And that's why they figured out how to do it without breaking the rules, technically.
Right.
But
yeah,
the teacher was like, we have to do something.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
It's just wild to think that something with so much addictive potential is the primary replacement for things like that. Maybe it's different now. I don't know. I haven't looked at those guidelines in years.
No, it's not. Nothing's changed.
Okay.
Spoiler alert. It's still depressing.
Okay.
But I just also think it's fascinating because cheese is hailed as a healthy food.
Yeah.
When it's wild to me to make that claim based on all the information.
Yeah.
And then people will say, well, no, but they're not promoting all cheese. They're primarily promoting low-fat
cheese.
Or skim mozzarella and stuff like that. Well, one, that's not what they're serving in schools.
Exactly.
So miss me with that.
Yeah.
Because if it really was about that, it would all be low-fat and non-fat being served in schools, and that's not what we're seeing. But two, even if you manage to take all the fat out of the cheese, which would also take all the flavor out, but even if you manage to take all the fat out of the cheese, it's still a concentration of casein.
And hormones.
So there's a fascinating section in the book called So Am I a Cheese Addict?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So I think, everyone just explore that for yourself. But what's interesting from that section is that he points out for a diagnosis of an opioid use disorder, you need to meet at least 2 of a list of things, right? And that list that you have to meet at least 2 of those things of includes the following items. 1, taking in larger amounts than intended. 2, persistent desire or unsuccessful attempts to cut down or control use. 3, craving or strong desire for the substance. And 4, continued use despite having a problem that has been caused or exacerbated by the substance.
Yikes.
So I'm not using this to make diagnoses or, jump to conclusions, but
for myself,
the facts are fascinating.
When I ate cheese, those 4 applied easily.
All 4 to me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will use I statements and own that those applied to me. Hence why I would say I could never be vegan because of cheese.
Right.
Like there's a reason I used to say that. Okay.
So like I said, we're not saying people are cheese addicts or addicted to cheese or diagnosing anyone, but I think it's fascinating to consider and very much worth
some self-reflection.
On
yeah,
this.
Definitely.
Because I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, and because the first one, say the first one again.
Taking in larger amounts than intended. Right.
And you said that it is the number one product that people say they can't control how much they take in, right? They basically overeat on cheese.
Yeah.
So, wow.
Makes them lose control over how much they intake.
Okay. So that is definitely something to think about and consider.
Mm-hmm. Real quick with all that. So I think that kind of helps explain a little bit deeper about why it's so difficult to quit, why it's such a unique food.
Yes.
So let's talk just a little bit about why we might want to consider not having it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from if you're interested in animal protection or animal rights, of course there's that. Environmental, of course there's that also.
Yeah.
But specifically looking at what is in dairy cheese, we mentioned the concentration of hormones, primarily estrogen, and we talked in depth about estrogen in our soy episode.
Yeah.
So if you want to go deeper in that, but taking in estrogen from real estrogen, like in dairy, soy has phytoestrogen. That's a different kind. That's not what we're talking about. But the estrogen in dairy, it's linked to a variety of cancers. And when you look at population data, it's interesting. In areas where dairy consumption is not very high, things like prostate cancer are very low.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the opposite in other areas where dairy intake is high.
Yeah.
And then there's also insulin-like growth factor, or IGF-1,
which
promotes growth, like you were talking about, helps
baby calves
grow to full-size cows. It's that IGF-1 promoting growth, concentrated in cheese, and studies also show that it promotes cancer growth.
I remember learning about that in biology.
Yeah, it's ringing a bell, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that good old IGF-1.
In micro.
So there's that, just to name a few, not to mention whatever other hormones find their way into it. And then talking about allergens, many people cite dairy as a trigger for other allergies and asthma.
That's your experience.
It's me.
Yeah.
I'm many people.
I'm one of many people.
Yes. And I've talked about that before too. When we gave up dairy, my asthma improved, my allergies improved.
Is it accurate to say that was the biggest improvement of anything you've been able to do?
Yeah, it was.
That getting rid of dairy, including cheese, was the biggest improvement of your asthma and allergies than anything else you had previously done.
100%.
Okay.
And I've done a lot of things.
Yeah. You did 4 years of allergy shots.
Treatments, lost 90 pounds, drank water, gave up soda, did vegetables. We did the Whole Foods 100 days of real food. We've done
sorts of
oh my
things.
gosh, so many things. Giving up dairy was by far and large the most significant impact to my asthma and allergies. And I just found that fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so the book points out that scientific studies in this area specifically are limited. So we don't have
in which area?
Linking dairy to asthma and allergies.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right? There's not like a definitive link, but studies do show a link. And like I say, I always shout it from the mountaintops.
Well, you even say I feel like there was one time we ate something and you were like, I wonder if there was some milk or whey product in it because your asthma reacted like it hadn't in years.
I did. I talked about it on a recent episode. I can't remember which one. But yeah, we went to a movie and we had snacks at the movie theater that we thought were vegan. And that night I had asthma symptoms all night. I had the worst heartburn. Yeah. Like indigestion I've had in forever.
When we woke up in the morning, you said, I thought I was going to have another asthma attack. And you haven't had one in 15 years.
Like going to the hospital.
Yeah.
Like I was going to need to go to the hospital. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was afraid of that.
It was so bad that night.
Yeah. And it stayed with me. So I called the theater and found out, in fact, one of the things we had did have dairy. And it wasn't even a lot. It wasn't the popcorn. It wasn't like I ate a whole tub of popcorn.
Yeah.
It was a pretzel.
Yes.
And I think we shared it.
Yeah. We did.
So, yeah, I'm like, wow.
Yeah. So, causation doesn't equal correlation or whatever the saying is. However, your experience is such that for you as an individual, there is a link between your dairy consumption and the intensity of your asthma and allergy symptoms and experience.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if, more studies can be done and what they find.
Yeah, it will.
Because asthma is a huge issue for many, many people.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay.
And then also is noted that melting cheese condenses it further.
Are you serious?
And makes overconsumption even more easy.
Well, that explains, wanting to eat a whole pizza.
I mean, think about it. If you have like a block of cheese, right?
Yeah.
Then you start to shred it and put it on pizza or put it on, nachos or something. Like this block looks like a lot, but then as you shred it and melt it, it's so much easier to eat such a larger amount.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder how much cheese is actually on a Costco pizza. Like, is it like an entire block of cheese? It has to be. Scary. Sorry to keep talking about that.
I know, we keep going back to the Costco pizza. You can tell that.
But I mean, even lots of other places, Pizza Hut, Godfather's.
Yeah. Oh
I
my
mean,
God,
some places put like
so much cheese. When you take a bite and you can pull it, and there's a string of cheese between your mouth and the pizza, like that. Yeah, there's so much. Oh my gosh.
Right, and
that makes it worse. It's more constant. The casein is more concentrated.
No, you
just use more cheese.
Right.
Like it's a higher concentration of cheese being used than if you just sort of ate a slice.
Exactly.
Like, break off a little piece of cheese from the block and eat it. You're going to eat way more when you shred it and melt it.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Think about it like spinach. It's not as dramatic, but if you try to just eat fresh spinach by the leaf, you're going to maybe eat a cup and you're like, that
Done.
was a whole lot. But if you, not melt it, but if you cook it, it wilts down and then you can eat
a whole bag.
A whole bag. Exactly.
A forest.
Exactly. You could eat a forest if it's cooked. Similar concept. Again, not as dramatic, but similar concept.
Wow.
And what's our favorite way to eat cheese? Melted. Is there another way?
Mm-hmm.
So then cheese is also linked to other respiratory problems. Like,
sorry.
We'll get there.
I had to think about it a little because it's the best way to eat cheese melted.
Put a pin in that.
Okay.
So just real quick, briefly, dairy, cheese, and dairy in general is linked to other respiratory problems like bronchitis and pneumonia. It's linked to headaches and migraines. And that's another one where I used to get headaches a lot more often. Those unexplained, I guess it's stress or I'm not sleeping good enough or I'm dehydrated.
Maybe I'm dehydrated, yeah.
No, I think it was just added sensitivity to dairy because I don't get headaches nearly as often. I'm still just as stressed and my sleep did not get much better.
Your water intake's better, but some days not that great.
Yeah. And yet. It's also linked to joint pains and arthritis. And I have a family member that always tells me, she's trying really hard to be fully plant-based and primarily whole foods. And then she lapses on cheese and then her joints are instantly in pain.
Yeah.
Just another anecdotal evidence, but it's really interesting. Also linked to skin conditions like psoriasis and acne.
Oh.
And
interesting.
I've seen so many stories about acne clearing up.
Yes.
When dairy's gone. Also linked to digestion issues and diabetes, including type 1.
Oh, interesting.
Which is interesting.
That is really interesting because most people just like type 1 isn't linked to any dietary things.
Except that when they did studies and looked at infants drinking dairy-based formula versus infants not drinking dairy-based formula, and I think also having to do with if the nursing mom was having dairy products or not, because that makes its way into
the breast milk.
The breast milk. There's a statistically significant difference, and they theorize that it has to do with the IGF-1, and I believe the IGF-1, but something about it causing the pancreas to attack itself, right? Because type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disorder.
Yeah, I believe so.
So, yeah, that would be interesting to get in the weeds of.
Yeah. But
we'll put a pin in that one, save it for another day.
Yeah.
And with all that said, let's talk about, we talked about how it's so, people are like, gosh, I'm just going to give up at this point. No, there's hope.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about how to quit.
Yeah.
How to get it out. Because Mickey and I did it. And if you know anything about us, we are foodies and we do not compromise when it comes to good food.
No.
Zero.
At all. Zero compromise.
Actually, sometimes I'll compromise.
Yeah, I don't.
For the sake of nutrients or health or something.
Or simplicity or
Or
whatever.
simplicity. I love simplicity. Yeah. I'll compromise for simplicity. Nikki doesn't do it.
No.
She's not having any of that.
I don't.
The food is good or it's not being served.
No, the food is good or I'm not eating it because you'll still eat it. So it still gets served.
Right.
You're like, whatever, I'll eat it. You know?
And yeah. And
Or sometimes I don't like it at all, but you boys will like it. And I'm just like, okay, fine. You eat it. I'll eat something else.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a problem.
So I hate the saying, like, if I can do it, anyone can do it. Or if you can do it, anyone can do it. I hate blanket statements like that.
Yeah.
I won't say that. But I will say I genuinely think
We understand.
there's hope. And
Yeah.
we understand
Yeah.
the struggle.
Yeah. Because, yeah, I don't like those either because I'm like, you don't know me. I'm stubborn. You don't know. Who do you think you are knowing what I can and can't do? Like, I
think
go
that a lot.
there.
If
Do you
they
know what I
can
mean?
do it,
Like,
you can do it. You
do-
must not know about
yes.
me.
Exactly.
So
That
my
one.
brain says instantly.
Yeah, it's bad. So we don't like those statements.
And
However,
we don't know what you're going through, what
Right.
your situation is.
Right.
All the things.
However, we will say if you have been struggling with cheese, we did as well. And cheese was that was my last frontier, essentially, in the like going vegan realm. Because I was like, all right, like eggs was another one that I really liked a lot because it was made for easy breakfasts for me. Well, I'll just do something else. Do you know what I mean? But cheese, oh my God. Because pizza, Philly cheesesteaks, though, like some of my favorites, you know. Anyway, we did it not without a struggle. Not gonna sugarcoat it. However, we did do it.
Yeah. So I want to share real quick Dr. Barnard's recommendations,
Okay.
and then I want you to share your recommendations.
Okay.
Dr. Barnard's recommendations are not far off from ours. Ours
Okay.
are a little bit more detailed. His is very basic.
Yeah.
Very, very basic. But
Well,
I think
that allows personalization at least, maybe.
exactly. I think that's the point. And again, they're actually in line with what we say. They don't contradict it. But he basically has 3 steps. Step 1 is check out the possibilities. So he says don't make any changes right away. Take a week or so to just explore possibilities and make a list of foods that you already know you like that don't have cheese. Or, you know, if you're like, I think he's talking about even going fully plant-based, you know, and he recommends categorizing breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. So you have a list
yeah.
of all the
Go-tos.
foods you could make that you know you like.
Yes.
Like, this is what we've talked about. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't try all these new recipes.
Right. No.
Go with your go-tos. Go with what
Yes.
you know you like. You know you eat on
Yeah.
a regular basis.
Yes. His is our equivalent is find your favorite meals, your go-to meals, and veganize those.
Yeah, that's the equivalent.
Yeah.
But I like that he says, you know, don't make changes right away because then you set yourself up for failure.
Right.
Then you think it's too hard and you can't do it.
Right.
Right. So then after you've taken time to do that, see what's accidentally vegan, what's already vegan, what you like, you have your list of go-tos, you can prepare adequately, shopping, all the things. Then he says step 2 is to do a 3-week test drive.
Okay.
Like go all in for 3 weeks
Okay.
and then see how you feel.
Okay.
I'm guessing that he thinks after 3 weeks you're going to feel so good that you're not going to go back.
Right.
And also you're going to see how doable it is.
Right.
You know, because it's a small commitment. It's not like I'm going vegan forever and then you're overwhelmed thinking you'll never have cheese again, you know. But if you can commit for 3 weeks, then you're like, oh, wow, 3 weeks was actually very doable.
Doable. Yeah.
And then step 3, jump in. So that's his recommendations. Like I say, pretty simple and straightforward. But I like your recommendations specifically for cheese because I fully agree with them.
Okay.
So what do you tell people?
So my suggestion usually is if you find that cheese is, you know, your last big hurdle because of the casomorphine and all of the stuff that we've talked about, my usual recommendation is to go cold turkey.
For lack of a better term.
Yeah, for lack of a better term. Just cut it out altogether. Go like a month. Don't even try vegan cheeses. Now, when we went vegan, there was less vegan cheeses on the market. And so now there's some that are really phenomenal. Not going to lie, some of the really phenomenal ones are on the expensive side.
Mm-hmm.
So I always recommend doing absolutely nothing. Just stop the cheese for like a month or so. Don't do anything. Don't try any of the vegan cheeses. And then after a month, start trying the vegan cheeses. And if you're still like, ugh, I don't like them, go stop and go another month. Because it might take a little while for it to sort of, quote unquote, leave your system.
Mm-hmm.
Also, your taste buds will change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all of that can really make a difference and really matter for some people wanting to quit cheese and stop eating cheese. It did for me. I needed it.
Yeah.
And because when we went vegan, there was Follow Your Heart cheese and Daiya cheese. And I think that was it.
And it was a different Daiya recipe.
It was
not the same.
It's not the same recipe.
Today.
Right. And when I tried it, I was like, ugh, I don't like this. Those were the two most accessible, easiest to find.
Yeah, I think there was a couple other, but not the variety we have today by any means. They were so delicious also.
No, I don't think so. I think at the beginning, I think So Delicious came out like a year or two later.
Oh, okay. My bad.
Yeah, no, at the very beginning, I really think it was Follow Your Heart and Daiya, their old recipe.
But it was limited.
It was pretty limited. Those were the main ones we could find. And I tried the Daiya cheddar shreds at that time, and I was just like, absolutely not. This isn't going to happen. And I was really sad about it. I was sad. And I was like, well, I guess I'm just not going to have any cheese replacements. I won't have anything with cheese. And so I went essentially cold turkey, quote unquote, and didn't do any vegan cheese or anything. And then finding our nacho cheese recipe that's up on the website. Well, ours is adapted. So finding the original recipe was a game changer for me because I was like, okay, I can do this nacho cheese. It hit the spot. But I think that was after this incident that really solidified for me recommending people try cold turkey, because probably like a month or two after, I was just like, all right, I'm just not going to eat any vegan cheese because I don't like it. Our friends invited us over. They were making Frito pies, and being supportive, wonderful friends that they are, they, had, the meat separate from the beans and the chili, and they grabbed a bag of vegan cheese for us, the shreds, and I think it was Daiya. And so being like thankful for it, I was like, all right, I'm gonna try it again in my Frito pie, and I liked it. Like, it did something. I was like, oh, why did I think it was so bad? This isn't that bad. This is pretty good. It goes well in a Frito pie. I don't remember how I had it the first time I tried it, so I didn't know. So it's like, all right, maybe mixed in with stuff. This is the way to do it, as opposed to like on pizza or something. But then I realized, oh no, I've basically, for lack of a better word, detoxed from cheese. Because I do, like I said before, all those 4 sort of addictive things that Dr. Barnard mentions, I had those. And so I think it got out of my system. And I didn't remember really anymore the actual taste of real cheese. And I wasn't having sort of that brain reaction in my head anymore when I was eating it. Like, it was gone. It was out of my system, essentially.
Yep.
And then I was able to like it's not the same, not gonna lie. It certainly wasn't the same. But it wasn't gross to me anymore. It wasn't bad to me anymore. Mm-hmm. And so if you try vegan cheeses, and you're not finding not only are there a lot to try now, so keep trying, but if you're finding that nothing's really hitting the spot, go a month without any. Do none. And see, then at the end of a month, if you try another one, then start experimenting again and see if you sort of need that time to get it out of your system. Allow the taste buds to change and stuff.
I love everything you're saying because it's all so true and so real. Mm-hmm. And I've had so many people, so many friends, acquaintances, colleagues. They're trying to go vegan or they just went vegan, and they ask me, what's a good vegan cheese? And my response is always like, I'm going to need like 20 minutes to break this down for you.
Yeah.
I cannot just give you a
a
quote unquote good vegan
Exactly.
cheese recommendation.
If you're
Because,
Mhm.
you know, there are good ones. There are every people have different preferences. It depends what you're making, how you're making it, what it's going to be prepared around.
Exactly.
There's like 50 different factors.
Yeah.
And if you're still addicted to dairy cheese, none of them are going to
Gonna
be good enough.
Yeah.
Right? It's
If
like
you're still consuming dairy cheese, it is not the same. It's not going to do it for you.
right. And I like the, you know, smoking cigarettes comparison because I did quit smoking at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of it as, imagine somebody who just quit smoking and then they say, do you know any good nicotine-free cigarettes? It's like, no, they're
No.
going to be you're going to hate them.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean? You just
Mhm.
quit drinking and what's a good non-alcoholic
Alcoholic.
beer?
Yeah.
None of them are going to hit the spot for you.
Yeah.
None.
None.
Because they might have all the flavor, they might have all the things that
But-
the other version
yeah.
has, but they don't hit your
Brain.
pleasure center
Yes.
in your brain the same way. None of them are going to do it.
Right.
So we have to have a conversation about how long have you been off cheese now?
Mhm. Yeah.
How are you feeling about it? You know, what are your cravings like? Blah, blah, blah. And on top of all that, you know, like I say, different cheeses go good in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, a saving grace for me in the early times of going vegan and just being like, I'm not going to eat any cheese. It's, you know, when I had that Frito pie with the vegan cheese and was like, oh, this is not as bad. I still had to like work with it, and it wasn't the same. But the nacho cheese recipe was massive for me.
Yeah.
Because, well, I love nachos, you know, and it hit the spot. I don't know how, but for me, it was massive and it hit the spot. And it's the recipe that I use. I put on nachos. I can make mac and cheese with it, and I would do enchiladas with it. So being able to have those three things in our lives at that early stage with that nacho cheese recipe was super helpful. So I also recommend people, like, once you've been off of cheese for a while you're experimenting with the vegan cheeses to find one you like, find a nacho cheese recipe you like that you can use in multiple dishes as a replacement so that you're still getting those familiars, comforting, yummy foods.
Right. Perfect segue. Because, yeah, I wanted to just wrap up by talking about some recipes and of our favorite products. And starting off with that nacho cheese recipe, this is the 727th time we've talked about it on the podcast.
Probably, yes.
But I do want to mention a little bit more about it because, like you say, it was our saving grace.
It was a
our
game
changer in
Yes.
the beginning.
Yeah.
It was everything to us. And the recipe that's on the website, that recipe is the way I like to make it ideally.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to mention that it's a very forgiving recipe.
It really is.
And half the time, I don't follow that recipe. And Mickey asks me to make it a lot of times because I have it down.
Uh-huh.
And I can just wing it and not think about it. And the reason being is because, like I say, it's very forgiving.
It's
as
so
long as you
forgiving.
have the basic ingredients, you can get away with stuff. And so, like, the recipe, you know, like I say on the website, that's the ideal one because I like to put a sweet potato in it because I like to add the nutritional variety and all of that. And I think it tastes good. And I like to use cashews for the fat because that's a little more, you know, whole foodsy and it's more allergen friendly if people have gluten sensitivities or whatever.
And it adds a little bit more depth and creamy.
Yeah,
I think,
the,
to
the
it.
creamy. Yeah, so that's the ideal thing. But if you're looking at it and like, I don't have raw unsalted cashews or, you know, I don't never buy those, or if it just like looks too much, you can always get away with not doing the sweet potato. I make it just like that with no sweet potato and no fresh onion. A lot of times it's just russet potatoes and carrots.
That is the base recipe that I found.
Yeah.
Is potatoes, carrots, oil, spices.
And flour.
And flour.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So originally we did it with oil and flour instead of cashews. Cashews, I think, are the only things that replaced oil and flour. But yeah, it's like if you don't have cashews, I was going to say, you can use oil and flour instead. And it's roughly 5 tablespoons of flour and 3 tablespoons of oil. And you can always adjust for your taste,
Yeah.
texture, and nutrition preferences.
Yeah. And you could probably use a gluten-free flour, no problem. I would say, because it's such a forgiving recipe.
I'm sure. Yeah. So like I said, as long as you have the potatoes, carrots, the nooch, or nutritional yeast for those who
Yeah.
don't know what nooch means, and a fat.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
And I think I've seen some low-fat, high-carb people not put any fat in it. And I think the flour is mainly for thickening. But we like the fat in it because it gives, I think it gives it a little more depth.
Gives it that depth.
That depth and that bit of satiation factor.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. Anyway, but that is the basic recipe that we had found, and it was such a saving grace.
Yeah. And that's why I just wanted to point out, like, it's forgiving. You can substitute and swap. It's still delicious.
Yes.
It gets that stretchy.
Yep.
Not stretchy like dairy cheese on a pizza, but like nacho cheese stretchy.
Yeah.
You know? It's where it's at.
And we make that recipe.
To this day, we make it at least once a week.
Yeah. All the time.
So, and then some other cheeses recipes that we've talked about before in the episode titled Game Day Snacks. We talked about 3 different cheeses that Mickey made at home from scratch that were super good.
So good.
One was a fresh mozzarella, one was a cheddar ball, and one was a chive cheese.
Yeah.
And they were just amazing for like a cheese and crackers type of thing, or like if you want to spread cheese on something. The mozzarella melted well on toast. It would be great for like a margarita pizza.
Yeah,
or
I would say
any
margarita
pizza that would
pizza.
put like fresh mozzarella on it. It would be so good. If you want to go more in depth on recipes and such, I recommend listening to that episode. And those recipes are linked in the show notes for that episode. I'll probably just link them in the show notes to this one so they're easily accessible.
Yeah.
Those are like the main recipes that we've made for making cheese at home.
Yeah. Well, the other one that I really like is there's an Alfredo recipe that uses cauliflower and hemp seeds.
Yeah, that's on the website because we did the webinar, the green chili chicken Alfredo pasta webinar.
Yeah. So that one is a really great Alfredo one, sort of a white cheese sauce if you wanted a white cheese sauce in your life.
Yeah, good call. I forgot about that one. And these are just some. There's,
So
countless
many.
things you can do. But it's a good start if you're like overwhelmed with what to try. So we recommend those. And then in terms of like the cheese products, like Mickey said, try different ones. Everyone has different preferences.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is it seems like every day, every time we go to the store, there's a different brand.
Yes.
There's a new line of something.
Yeah. We were just at Walmart and they had this, I think this was the first time I've seen it, a plant-based certified vegan cheese.
Great value
brand. And I hadn't seen that before.
Yep. It's like even Great Value is making it now.
Yeah.
And one thing I've noticed that I wanted to point out about the vegan cheeses, with getting them to melt, is that a lot of them seem to melt better if they're sort of in between 2 other things.
Yeah.
Like if you just put cheese on top of your pizza and put it in the oven, it might not always melt
the way
just right.
Right.
But if you put like some toppings on top of the cheese and put it in the oven, it seems to melt a lot better.
It helps it melt better, yeah.
Or like making a grilled cheese, the cheese that's in between the 2 pieces of bread melts really well. But if you try to just melt it on top of a piece of toast, it might not melt. So I always like to tell people that might be a trick to get it to melt really good, really well.
Yeah.
Or like mixing it in something,
Yeah.
And the other thing I was going to say, with all the new products, I wonder if it's even easier. Well, it's easier. Every day it's easier to go vegan because of all the things. But they're getting to the point where we almost can't even tell anymore.
Yeah.
And it might be because it's been so many years since we've had dairy cheese. But the last pizza we got from a restaurant, I was really questioning.
Oh, my God. Me too. No, when the boys and I went on an outing, and we stopped at there was a Italian pizza place across the street, and I called them and asked if they had vegan cheese, and they said yes. And we got it, and it was so melty and was so good I couldn't tell.
Yeah.
And I was concerned it wasn't vegan cheese.
Yeah.
And Teen tasted it. We let it cool a little bit more. Teen tasted it. He's like, no, he's like, I think it's vegan. It tastes more vegan. He's like, because I like it.
So that was our
tell. And then I double checked with the waitress and she's like, oh yes, no, I made sure. She's like, I have dietary restrictions too, so I know how it is when you go out. And so I was like, okay, great. And none of us got sick, so it was vegan, but
yeah. But then when I was eating it, I was like, are you sure though?
Yeah.
This is
so
it's
good.
more melty
I
and
know.
gooey than any other vegan cheese. But yet it wasn't a complete glop. Like dairy.
Right.
So I was like, well, we'll see how sick if I get sick or not. And I didn't at all.
Yeah.
So
well, I don't know what brand that was because I should probably call them back and ask because it was so good.
Find out. But yeah, that's the point. It's just like it's getting the recipes, the products are just getting so much more and more closer every day.
Yeah. So I think finding, you might not need to go cold turkey as long as I did. But that's usually what I recommend to people still. But there's so many products on the market now. Like if you don't like one, just try a different brand because there's so many to try.
Yeah. And then for the time being in between when you are if people are, on a detox or a cleanse or just stepping away from cheese altogether, I want to remind people, don't forget about the power of the avocado.
Oh, yes.
Because you might be thinking like, well, what am like tacos without cheese? If you put an avocado slices in a taco, that goes a long way.
It really does. It gives you that creamy, smooth texture and taste.
Right.
Like it gives you the creamy that I think some people are looking for in like tacos or sandwiches.
Right.
You know?
Even in rellenos, before La Salita had vegan cheese, they made vegan rellenos, but they put avocado in them in place of the cheese. And it did it for me. It was so good.
So good.
So sometimes,
That's a good point.
Sometimes you just need like a fat.
Right.
Or something creamy.
Yes.
So like in the book, Dr. Barnard recommends, there's tons of recipes and stuff like that, of course. But one of the things he talks about is with pizza, if you can make a pizza without any cheese at all. And then after it comes out of the oven, you can drizzle some avocado cream or some cashew cream on top.
Yes.
To just give you some of that creamy
and fat.
Exactly. So I think that some good tips for if you're trying to just not do any of the cheese at all, but still get that flavor and texture. I thought that was genius.
Yes.
And then just rethinking how you prepare your food, because another thing that he mentioned that I was like, oh yeah, is when you're making pizza, if you grill or saute your veggies before you put them on the pizza, before you bake it, that takes the flavor and depth to a whole nother level.
Yes.
Right, than just putting raw veggies on a pizza and then letting them sort of cook in the oven while the pizza bakes. It's like, oh, imagine caramelized onions on a pizza.
Yes.
Or, grilled peppers and things like that.
Roasted broccoli.
Right.
Yeah.
And then put it on your pizza and then bake it. So you don't really need as much flavor to come from cheese. And even if you are using vegan cheese or whatever, it's a way, because then you use a lot less. It got me thinking, like, because when you were talking about just giving it up for a month, some people might be like, where am I going to get flavor from? And so these are just some things to think about. Different fats, different creams, different ways to add some of that into your foods if you're really wanting some of that.
Yeah, that's helpful. What do you think the tofu sour cream to give that sort of creamy?
Yes, that's another great one.
That's a good one too.
Yep. The sour cream that you make from tofu at home.
Silken tofu,
simple recipe. And that's another great one to add a little bit of that too.
Yeah. Okay.
Good call.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Are
we complete?
I think we're complete.
That was a lot.
We're ready to give up the cheese.
Yes.
Or switch to vegan cheese.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully this was helpful.
Yeah. Hopefully that understanding was interesting and beneficial to
Yeah.
help move away from dairy cheese and or stay away from dairy cheese and continue this vegan journey.
Yes.
So if you have more questions or comments, we'd love to hear about it. And otherwise, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us. We release new episodes every 2 weeks. You can always email us at plantbased@apnm.org or visit our website at apnm.org/plantbased for classes, recipes, and more resources.
See you in 2 weeks.